Well, thanks for joining us. We are the Region 3 Parent Resource Center, and we are made up of the counties of Caroline County, Spotsylvania County, and Stafford County. Today, we welcome staff from all of these counties, plus all of the Region 3 localities, which includes Fredericksburg City and King George County as well. We will be providing some basic information on these three topics, which will help our families determine if these are services that their children need or qualify for. We're going to share some important timeline considerations they need to know about, and some local contact information for community agencies that they will need to work with. The resources that we're going to provide to you, I'm going to put in the chat, links in the chat so you can pull them up and look at them as we go along. These resources were designed to be one-page infographics that you can share either electronically or you can print out hard copies and share with your families as they need this information. This is the helpful links that I'm going to put into the chat. This is an outline that participants can use for today's presentation, and it also gives you all of the infographics that you can share with families. So this is the first one we're going to be talking about. As you can see, this infographic is just a one pager that you can hand out to your families. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over now to our Caroline County Parent Teacher Resource Center, Susan Gale and Melissa White, Caroline County Transition Coordinator, so they can start giving you a little bit of information about guardianship.
Guardianship. What is guardianship? A guardian is appointed by the court, incapacitated person. Guardians can be in charge of some or all personal affairs of this person. If you are concerned about the ability of your child with disabilities to make adult decisions when they turn 18, you may want to explore guardianship. You will want to start this process about 6 months before your child's 18th birthday. How do I find an attorney? Well, here are some links that we've provided for you to find guardianship attorneys in Virginia. Search for guardianship of incapacitated or disabled individuals. How much does it cost? Attorney fees range for guardianship from a minimum of $1,500 to an average of $3,500. Court costs, which include filing fees, service fees, and fees for letters of guardianship, can quickly reach excess of $1,000. Emergency services grant information is listed in this website, along with legal aid works as well.
So here's some more information. This is detailed information. As Courtney said earlier, the resources for guardianship can be found on Fact Fred. There is a recording from an in-depth training that was done on there. And also the frequently asked questions for appointment of guardians and conservators are on that link there. That's also on that infographic. That Find It Here link with it where it says Wix site. That one has the most information I've seen pretty much from anywhere. Very detailed, more information that you probably want to have to read, but it really is good. So that might be something where families would want to research. So you can see from so far from the information that we've already given you, it's a ton of research that needs to be done to even look into guardianship. The thing to understand is there's more than just guardianship. It does not have to be guardianship. There are other alternatives. And so these other links that are provided here provides options that a family may want to consider depending on their family situation. So some of the things that might be available for the families would be a conservatorship. You may have heard about that with Britney Spears. That's what her father had for her. So many people may not have ever heard that term until it was kind of made famous through Britney Spears. Another thing would be a representative payee or authorized representative. Most people have heard of power of attorneys, and all of these can be adjusted and designed specifically for the family member that it's for. And then we have trust. Most people have heard of those as well. On that link there, sorting the pieces, this is an additional resource from VCU, a little infographic that kind of gets into the details of a little bit of information on each of those alternatives. And you can find that on the VCU website as well. We also have durable medical power of attorney. So you see, you can have a regular power of attorney or you can have the medical power of attorney. Everything can be designed specifically for your family member. So it's a lot of information that needs to be discussed in the family with someone that understands all of these different alternatives would be very beneficial. Representative payee, which is someone that just handles the financial part of things or the medical things. The limited guardianship, again, it's through a court order, but it also has to be very specific for what is necessary. And then the limited conservatorship. And this has to be researched, and it's very specific to the individual that's going to be served with this, because, depending on what they can do or what they can be participating in, a straightforward guardianship may not be the answer. However, you can have a guardianship and then tweak that and make that very individualized. So some key points to keep in mind. Any of the guardianship, the alternatives that were mentioned here, all of those can be individualized and adjusted according to the child and or the family circumstances. And they can be tweaked as circumstances change, so that as they get older and maybe things change, maybe they have other people involved in their lives that may want to be a part of these legal documents that would be set up for them. And it should involve the child whenever possible for their input, because remember, it is their life. And the most important thing is the process must be started before the child turns 18 years old, preferably 6 months to a year in advance. And if you look at all of that information, and if you have to set up appointments with an attorney or different legal people to get these things in place, it may take longer than 6 months. So even researching it up to a year in advance might be preferable.
Thank you so much. Becca Leggett is on the phone with us. She's going to be sharing a little bit of information about supplemental security income. She's very knowledgeable about this topic. And Becca, I have right now just a picture of the two infographics up on the screen.
The majority of the time in the school setting, when we're talking about SSI, we are talking to our students and families the student is turning 18. That's the majority of time. However, we're going to have times when we have children receiving SSI. That's why you have one of each. And I'll talk a little bit about SSI versus SSDI. So when we sit down with families and we're at the table and that we're starting to talk about Social Security, it can get very confusing for us as staff and for us as parents. I'm a parent and a staff person from both standpoints. When we start talking about Social Security, you automatically think, well, I'm going to apply for Social Security, so I'm going to be applying for Social Security disability insurance. It has the word disability in it. That is not the case. There are two times when we have Social Security that addresses the needs of our people that are disabled. So the easiest way to think about it, it was the day I heard it described as Social Security disability insurance is entitlement. It is the insurance, the Social Security that we would receive as individuals who have worked and paid into the Social Security system. So if we became disabled, any of us, anytime in our career before retirement age, we can apply for Social Security disability. Our payment will be based on how much we have put into Social Security. Some of our students may be at that point that they have worked enough, that they have enough credits, and they would have SSDI. But for all intents and purposes for this conversation, that one's entitlement. Let's take that one off the plate. We're going to talk about SSI, supplemental security income. That's the one that affects our students. So think of it, it's assistance. It's needs-based. In order to qualify for SSI, they're going to provide monthly payments to people who have limited income and resources. So they're looking at people who are 65 and older, as well as those of any age, including children, who are blind or who have a disability. While these two programs are different, the medical requirements for disability are the same for both if they meet the non-medical requirements. Have they worked and put into the system? Have they not? So for SSI, if you hear a parent say, I'm applying for SSDI, know in your mind you need to help them, correct them, send them to us to talk about SSI. That's where our students fall. SSI for children with disabilities, the child has to be under the age of 18, or they can be under the age of 22 if they're regularly attending school. They have to be either blind or disabled. And if the child is under 18 and they live at home, the parent's income and resources will be considered in that determination of do they qualify for Social Security, SSI. So if there's a parent in the household receiving SSI, SSDI, or they have retired and they are now receiving Social Security of any kind, then that child might qualify based on those things. Otherwise, they're going to look at that family income. They're looking at that low income, limited resources type qualification for that. So we may have some students with disabilities that meet that criteria and can get SSI payments when they're younger than 18. If a child is receiving SSI payments, they can apply for Medicaid. In some states, it's automatic that if they start receiving SSI, then they automatically qualify for Medicaid. Virginia is one of the states where they have to fill out an additional application for Medicaid in order to receive it. But the bulk of the time when you're sitting at the table or you're working with a family here in the school, bulk of the time we're working with our students who are 18 plus. They're reaching that age of majority. They're now going to be their own household. They're considered an adult. And it's really important if this is the first time the federal government goes in and does a disability determination. They look at the individual's disability. They get all sorts of records from us as parents, and they make a determination, yes, this is an individual with a disability. That becomes all important for families with kids with disabilities because from this point on, my son is now 28. There are so many times I get asked, is he receiving Social Security by other agencies and that sort of thing? And I have to say, yes. Why that's important is because we got a disability determination by the federal government, and in the eyes of the government, my son is an individual with a disability. So a lot of our services as families are based on this as we go along. The individual has to have limited income and resources. That limited income and resources is considered $2,000 or less is where their income has to stay. If it's over $2,000 in their name, they don't qualify. So we do see families asking questions about that, talking about that. Social Security will do a look back of about 6 months to a year. So if parents have college savings accounts, that sort of things, they have to start moving those and changing the names on those because of this piece of limited income. I did add in they are U.S. citizens originally from the U.S. or some non-citizens. So if we have a student, they're here with permanent residency, they're here with a green card. If they have a Social Security card issued by the U.S., they can qualify for SSI. So that is something that is addressed on an individual basis as they come along. They also need to reside in one of our 50 states, D.C., or the Mariana Islands. But there's an exception. Since we're largely military community here and all of our school systems deal with military families, when a family is temporarily abroad or permanently stationed abroad, if they have a child with disabilities or a young adult who's receiving SSI, that individual can continue to receive their SSI payment even though they don't live in the U.S. That is the one exception of someone that can live outside the U.S. and receive SSI. So if the individual is turned down for SSI, there is an appeals process that is on the infographic. That is really important because SSI gets to see an individual on paper, but they don't get to know a lot about that person. I can think of a young man with Down syndrome was denied SSI. When his mom made the appointment, took him in, he was like, he has Down syndrome. They could see that. But because he was working and he was successful and had been working for a while, that was one of the things that they had considered and one of the reasons and the factors in denying him. So they appealed it and he got SSI. But we have to keep that in mind. And there's that falls into some important information for you guys as you're sitting at the table too, with our students who are working toward a standard diploma. When we have students with disabilities working toward a standard diploma, we need to be addressing the impact of their disability on their ability to work, on their ability to live independently. Because sometimes, especially in the realm of our students with autism, they may have all the pieces to do the academic work, understand it, pass the SOLs, get that standard diploma, and graduate at 18. When Social Security sees that on a piece of paper, or they see that the individual was able to get their driver's license and drive, they're not seeing that autism and how that impacts them, and we are seeing students get denied for SSI. One family that over the last year come to us and they said, hey, just to let you know, they have 3 children with autism, 2 boys and a girl. The 2 boys went through SSI, no problem. It was easy to see. It was easy to get the disability determination through Social Security. But it came to the daughter. She had been able to get a standard diploma. Her autism impacted her ability to work. It impacted her ability to live independently. But when Social Security looked at it, they didn't see that. They were denied. They appealed. They were still denied. One of the lawyers that we work with for some of our trainings, I talked to him about that because it had just happened. His child with autism in the exact same situation. So if we are addressing in like our class or whatever, also that important fact of their disability impacts their ability to work, then that parent has something else to pull out and say, this was in their IEP too. And maybe Social Security can see more about how that child, that individual's disability affects them and take into account and have a better picture of what this individual looks like. So be aware of that as you're going into those transition meetings and starting to talk about that. Kind of talk about that piece if you can. Also, if you have a student who's already receiving and lucky enough to have a developmental disability waiver, they have to apply for SSI by the time they're 19. They have a year of grace. And the reason being is Social Security looks at this, if we have an individual that qualified for a waiver as a person with a disability, now they're 18, and we don't, as parents, go and apply for SSI, whether life has gotten in the way, our child's disability has gotten in the way, we just hadn't thought of it. At age 19, we can find out like one parent did when they went in to put for their attendant services and to put in the time so the attendants get the paid. It got turned down. When the mom went in, did the investigation, it was because the child had turned 19. They had not applied for SSI. Well, if you're disabled and you need a waiver, then you need to be going to SSI and getting that disability determination done at 18 and receiving SSI services. It becomes all important for our families who are receiving those waiver services. So just be aware that there are situations like that. And Social Security, probably as my son has come along and we have done all the things that we're talking about right now, that has probably been the one that has ended up being the most important of what I have done for his future services. So I'm going to turn it back over to Courtney to talk about Medicaid waivers.
Thank you, Becca. The next set of resources from the helpful link sheet that I posted at the beginning are going to be the Medicaid waivers infographic and the Medicaid waivers fact sheets. This is a very basic infographic that you can share with families. It just tells the families what a Medicaid waiver is. It is a provision in Medicaid law which allows states to expand coverage to certain target groups and individuals with disabilities who've already gone through the disability determination and meets the criteria in Virginia of having a developmental disability. This Medicaid waiver provides alternatives to institutional care so that they can remain in their homes. Medicaid waivers are independent of Medicaid. So these are 2 different things. There are 2 different types of Virginia home and community-based services waiver programs that we're talking about. And you probably heard the DD waiver, the developmental disability waiver, and the CC Plus waiver, which is called the Commonwealth Coordinated Care Plus waiver. As far as timelines are concerned, this is really important. There is a very long wait list for the DD waiver. It could be 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years, depending on which tier they're in. And Becca's going to talk to you a little bit more about the tiers in just a second and how those are assigned. Individuals can access services through the CCC Plus waiver while they're on the DD waiver wait list. So it's very important that families get their children on the DD waiver wait list as soon as possible if it's a child that would qualify for that. Families can also apply for the Individual and Family Support Program, or IFSP funds, while they're on the DD waiver waitlist. Those are only available once a year, usually in the fall, and we have a link there that families can go to, not just explore that website, but also sign up for alerts and be on their email list so they can get alerts about that and when that opens back up. So that has just recently closed. That'll be open again next fall. There are 2 different places that families are going to have to go to schedule a screening for the waivers. For the DD waiver, they're going to need to contact the Rappahannock Area Community Services Board. And there are different phone numbers there listed for the different localities. So families can click on the website or they can call the phone numbers. For the CCC Plus waiver, individuals and most of the children we're talking about in our schools are going to be under the age of 18. They're going to need to contact their local health department. They can click on that link, or you can click on that link and find the local health department for your locality and help them get in touch with them through that. If they're over 18, they're going to need to go through their local Department of Social Services to schedule a screening. And the link to find your local social services is on there as well. In addition, you can find more detailed information at the dmosvirginia.gov. And I'm just going to click on this real quick to show you what it looks like. It has some information in here about the DD waiver and the CCC Plus waiver. But what I really love about this, and this is going to take you straight to the DMOS 3-page fact sheet that we also shared with you, which gives you an overview of the differences between the 2 waivers, as well as eligibility criteria, what services are covered under each waiver, and how to apply. Becca, you want to share any additional information about the tiers? I'm going to turn this over to you.
One thing I would say, and I will give you, like Courtney said, the waiting list is long. When we look at just the numbers for our Rappahannock region, we vary anywhere from a little less than 800 to a little more than 800 people on the waiting list in this area. That's not the state number, that's just our region. So when we look at that approximately average 800 people on the list, right now, little more than half of them show up in our tier 1, which is our top tier of need. They have recently passed some new requirements and stuff. Everybody on the list is being revisited by our Community Services Board staff. They're being reevaluated. What they're trying to do is really pin down that top tier need, maybe reduce its size and look at the supports and services the people are getting to see if they can fall into the other tiers. So what happens is in the top tier, we're looking at people who need a waiver immediately to within this year, to a year. So we're talking, it could be somebody who is going to be homeless if they don't get a waiver soon. It could be somebody who is in their 60s being supported and have been raised by their grandparent or their parent or their sibling or whoever that is now in their 80s. There's situations like that. Those things fall within that top tier immediate need. So then we look at tier 2. That's somebody who's going to need a waiver within the more than a year to 5 years. They're going to need supports and services in place to help them. Then we look at tier 3, which is 5+ years. Those that are receiving some services, that are receiving support, maybe they're getting a CCC Plus waiver. They qualified for with a medical condition for that one. So they're receiving supports and services. Those are counted when they look at that level of need into that. They may be receiving school services. That's looked at when they're doing that evaluation. They do an evaluation called the VIDES, which they come out and they look with each family at, what's the health of the family, what's the health of the child, what's the different conditions. And we tell parents all the time, if anything happens within your family situation, that's the time to contact your caseworker and let them know there's been a change, because it can change you in your tiers. And when the state gives money and gives waiver positions, waivers out, each region is given the number of slots that they have. There's a waiver selection committee that meets. It is headed by DDHDS, which is Department of Behavioral. Somebody will have to help me with the rest of that acronym. But they manage all the committees, and so they come together. So let's say Rappahannock region is given 40 waivers. That would mean that committee is going to be gathered. They're going to come together. They're going to see probably somewhere around 100 of the most needy of the needy. There is a form that is filled out by the case managers. It's a little bit like, in some ways, like a rubric from what I've seen. And information is supplied about different situations, health, condition, behaviors, whatever it may be. That committee will then evaluate that. They are scored. And then based on those scores, those positions are given out. In the Rappahannock region, a good year looks approximately like 40 to 50 waivers given out. So when we have a waiting list of around 800 and we are giving out 40 to 50 a year, that tells you why those waiting lists can be so long. So that's a little of the sad news about the waivers. But the waivers are well thought out. They were redone probably about 5 years ago, and they fall into 3 areas. So they actually now do look at the individuals and what they need. So we have building independence waiver for individuals who are 18 and older, and those are the ones that don't need as many supports and services. We're trying to get them independent, but it provides a lot of services. There's family and an individual support waiver and a community living waiver. So those are divided out, and there are services that are offered with each one of those. There's charts out there that show all of this, but the main thing to remember about the waivers is they need to contact the Community Services Board, and that the waiting list can be quite long. I think that's it, Courtney.
Thank you so much. And what she was talking about there with the 3 different types of waivers fell underneath the DD waivers. That's the one with the very long waiting list. While individuals are on the waiting list, individuals can access the CCC plus waiver. There was a question in the chat I want to address very quickly. Is the CCC plus waiver tied to Medicaid's coordinated care providers? And no, they're not. This came from the waiver presentation that's on the factfred.com website. This was a presentation that we had last year as part of the Pathways to the Future series. It is very unfortunate that the names are so similar, but the CCC plus and the CCC plus waiver are 2 different things. The CC Plus is a managed healthcare services program, and the CCC Plus waiver is about long-term care services. So they do provide 2 separate things. And I just wanted to show you this because this visual really helped me because I was very confused about that as well. On the helpful link sheet at the bottom, you will see the Region 3 PRC phone numbers. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. If you have families who have more in-depth need of knowledge regarding one of these topics, please direct them to their parent resource center or their parent teacher resource center. If you're in a county that does not have a parent resource center and you're not sure who to contact in your county, you can also reach out to us and we'll let you know.
Courtney, there was a question from one of the participants. Does a parent need a social security number to apply for SSI?
There is online a document called SSI for non-citizens. Now, they have very specific criteria. They need to have a green card. They need to be here on permanent residency, which gives them a social security number. So there is a document. So you can just go on Google SSI for non-citizens. It's going to pull up the actual social security publication, and it'll give you all the specifics. We work with a lot of our Spanish-speaking families on SSI, guardianship, and waivers. So we do pull that form on a fairly regular basis and have that in our repertoire of stuff we can use with our families.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.